This is Mark McNeese, and you're listening to One Thing or Another, the interviews. Welcome to One Thing or Another, an interview podcast. This is Mark, your host. I want to just run through a couple of quick introductory announcements. You can find us at onethingoranotherpodcast.com. We're also on Libsyn, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, and now CastBox, thanks to listener Matt Moore for that one. You're welcome to sign up for the podcast at the website and just get an easy email whenever they come out. I'm trying to do these weekly, but we'll see. And the other thing is, if you have comments or suggestions or questions, feel free to email me at onethingoranotherpodcast@outlook.com. There we go. Now I want to get right into my guest today. It's Molly DeVoss. She is a cat behaviorist out there in, is it in Dallas, Molly?
I'm in Dallas part of the year and Santa Fe, New Mexico, the other part of the year.
You have homes in both?
I do.
Nice. Now I'm just going to let people know, because I'm going to ask you about you, but this is the About Molly from the website. It's catbehaviorsolutions.org, correct?
That's right.
Right, and Molly is a CFTBS, that's Certified Feline Training and Behavior Specialist, who has rescued and fostered hundreds of kittens and cats over the years. She rehabilitated a paralyzed cat to full recovery in just 8 weeks and continues to rehab many amputee cats and underage kittens. See, I didn't know that about you. She has volunteered well over 3,600 hours with Dallas Animal Services, dedicated to saving felines. As a feline behavior specialist, she uses her education and knowledge on feline behavior and modification to help guardians, that's a nice word, I don't like owners, enable their cats to express natural behaviors in ways that are preferable for both the humans and the cats. Now that's the text version of Molly. Tell us a little bit about you in your own words.
Well, that's it in a nutshell, actually. I have a passion for cats, obviously. I have a passion to save cats because I spend so much time in a high-volume shelter. I see a lot of cats end, unfortunately, in euthanasia, mostly because of behavior. And I have a mission to cut that number down.
Now, what got you into cats and cat behavior?
Well, into cats in general, it's funny. My parents were dog people. We never had cats. I brought home a kitten I found at school in the 6th grade, and brought it home, snuck it home in my backpack. And I named it Alfie because my dad had an Alfa Romeo, and I thought it might make him like it better and let me keep it. And that was my first cat. My parents just were never into cats. It's something I was born with. I've always been able to read them. I've had a real inherent sense on what they're thinking. I can observe their body language better than other animals. It just seems to have been natural. And then in terms of saving cats, again, that's just exposure of seeing so many cats being surrendered for one reason or another, usually behavior, into shelters. And the cats are terrified there. And that plight in itself made me want to do something about it. So I started this nonprofit to try to help save more of those little guys.
How long ago did you start it?
I started the nonprofit a little over a year ago.
Really? That recent?
Yes, recently.
Now, it was interesting because before we started the show, I was talking to you about our new cats here with Frank and I, my husband. And I think the same thing. I think that I instinctively am able to read cats. I love cats. I've had many of them over the years. But hearing you articulate that reminded me of my own, like with Wilma that I was talking about with our new cat. Just being able to understand how they want to be approached, what they're going to react to, and what's going to scare them off. And even with cats that I've had before that were long time animal companions, I've never had trouble giving them pills or clipping their nails or anything like that. They've always allowed me to do that. And I think part of that is because they're comfortable with me, you know?
Mm-hmm. They're excellent at reading our body language and, and our tone. And they know when we're nervous or when we're afraid. They can hear it, they can smell it, they can see it. And of course, they react accordingly. So if you're confident and not afraid of them, then, they know that and they know you're not going to hurt them.
I also think they know when we don't like them.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Although, what's funny, you always hear that story that, you have a group of people over for a dinner party, and the one person that's either allergic to cats or fearful of cats is the person that the cat will go to. And the reason is because that person's not making eye contact with the cat. That person's not reaching out and trying to touch it and make it interact with them. And it makes the cat more comfortable, and they'll go to that person because it's less threatening to them.
That's interesting. Now, I was going to ask you, what are some of the most common things that you deal with? Because you and I met through a Facebook friend, Karen Kennedy, because I know that she fosters lots of cats, and we got Wilma. It said on the description that she had been rescued from a hoarder situation, and at the time at Bucks County SPCA, I didn't even think about what does that mean. We just said, oh, she needs a good home. She lived with a bunch of cats, but it does mean things that we've since found out, and that's how I ended up finding you, because she was so scared she wouldn't come out from under the couch. And I said to Karen, can you recommend somebody? And she recommended you. But what are some of the most common issues that you deal with people looking for your assistance?
Absolutely. The most common is inappropriate urination. And the second is usually aggression, either aggression to cat aggression or cat to people aggression. I often get cases where people don't introduce a new cat properly, and they have a bad incident between the two cats, and then they end up sequestering one of the cats to a room, and a year later they find me and trying to rebuild and mend that relationship between the two cats and getting them to successfully share space is very difficult. Urinating outside the litter box is much easier. That's a much easier thing to fix than aggression. Aggression's very complicated. And then I also get destruction. Their cat is tearing up the new furniture and destroying carpets and things like that. Those are the most common.
Well, that was one of the reasons I reached out for somebody, was because the new cat, I knew she had to be going to the bathroom somewhere, but she was not using the litter box that I had put in the living room out in the open. And as it turned out, I think I found she was going behind the TV, and you told me put the litter box back there, and I did, and she did. She uses it now. She uses there's 3 boxes, and she uses them. And you had said the most interesting thing. You said she's trying to tell you she wants privacy. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely believe that, because as soon as it was where she could not be seen and do her thing privately, it worked. And I'm also definitely going to look up the how to introduce a new cat, because we just got another one. Now, I mentioned that the oldest cat, Jessie, that we have, there's been no problem at all between her and Wilma, none at all. But I want to make sure that that's the case with Peanut, the one we just brought in. So I'm going to be looking all that up. She is sequestered. I did it the right way. She's got her own space, but I'll make sure that they meet each other appropriately as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And some cats, Wilma was an interesting situation, because most cats like to have the litter boxes, not in the middle of the living room, but not tucked away in small spaces. Because in the wild, when they defecate and they urinate, they are marking territory. And so they'll do it out in the open where neighboring cats can see it and smell it and realize that that's the boundary to their zone. So they don't like covered litter boxes because they'll feel trapped.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't go into caves and holes in the wild to go to the bathroom. They'll go out in open spaces. But when you have a cat that's very shy and fearful, she feels more protected back there behind the TV. You still have two exit routes. So if something were to come get her from behind the TV, she's got a way to get out the other side. And that's what makes that work for her. And in hoarding situations, a lot of people think, well, if you have someone that had 35 cats, that had to be a crazy cat lady that was taking really good care of them all. And that's just not the case at all. No one has time to properly take care of that many cats. And so they are the more under-socialized cats and the ones that have had to deal with intense territorial battles and high stress situations. So they're definitely the ones that need the most patience and work.
Right, and you had said to me too early when we talked the second time or something like that that it was as close to a feral cat as you will get indoors, and that was like, oh my God, did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
But she's adorable. I mean, she got a safe place for the rest of her life. So hopefully she'll make as much progress as she possibly can. What are a few of the do these things that you advise for cat caretakers or guardians, regardless of behavioral issues? Like anybody who really wants to be a good guardian for a cat and share their life with that. What are some of these? Like, make sure you do these.
The most important is nutrition. A lot of people think that if they feed canned food, that their cat will get fat, and that is a total myth. Cats that are fed a dry kibble diet only their whole lives will stay mildly dehydrated and are destined to kidney and renal issues in late life. And that is the number one medical cause of death in cats. The number one cause of death in cats overall is shelter euthanasia. But medically, it's kidney issues. So it's very, very important that you feed a moist diet. At least 60% of their food intake should be canned or a hydrated, freeze-dried raw diet or a homemade diet. There's some very good homemade diets. I posted one on my blog just the other day. November 1st was National Cook for Your Pet Day. So I posted a great homemade diet for cats. But it's very, very important that they get hydration. In the wild, they eat 9 to 10 small meals a day, and those consist of rodents and birds and rabbits and things. And those carcasses have, 86% water content, just like our bodies do. So in the wild, the cat's going to get most of its hydration from the food it eats, and it drinks very little water. And we've got to mimic that best we can. And we don't need to go out and catch mice and rabbits and feed them to our cats, but it's important that we feed them a high-quality canned food. They are obligate carnivores, so they need meat. They don't need a lot of vegetables and fruits. Certainly no byproducts. So nutrition is the number one thing. It's just like us. If we're malnourished or we're obese or we're not nutritionally healthy, we don't feel good. And when you don't feel good, you get cranky. Same thing with cats. When they don't feel good, then they have behavior issues. And then secondly, litter boxes. So I don't think, the commercial market that makes litter boxes make them for people. They make them covered so we don't have to look at the mess. And a covered litter box not only makes a cat feel trapped, but it also concentrates the urine particles in the air in there. And their noses are extremely sensitive, about 3,000 times more sensitive than our noses. So uncover those litter boxes and give cats free access to them. Those are the two most important things you can do. And keeping that litter box clean is another thing. They're very fastidious.
Yes. And a good cat litter. I mean, if you can find a cat litter because a lot of cat litter I think is not very good. We've been using Dr. Elsie's, and I like it.
Cat litter, it needs to be very soft and sandy because that's natural feeling to a cat. These are descendants of an African wildcat that comes from a northern Egypt kind of sandy area. And so they like the texture of sand. I have an enclosed outdoor catio, large enclosed outdoor catio for my cat, and we built him a sandbox out there. He loves it. He much prefers to go out there and use a sandbox to his indoor litter boxes. But I think clumping is obviously a handy thing for us people, and I prefer sweet scoop cat litter because it is all natural, it's biodegradable, it clumps, it actually smells kind of sweet, even though it's SWHEAT because it's a wheat product, and it's natural. So if a cat gets in there in a clumping litter and steps in some moisture and has litter clump between their toes and they go to chew that out, ingesting that, if a litter has a lot of chemicals in it or deodorants, that can be very harmful to them. So they can't digest it. So I think it's important to use a natural.
Yeah, we used to use Sweet Scoop, so I know which one you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Just a couple more questions. You recently had an article in the IABC. What's that stand for?
International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants.
Okay. You had an article in there about special challenges of senior cats in shelters. Now, we have a senior cat. She's 20. She's obviously not in a shelter. But, for instance, I just recently have started to give her a senior formula food because she vomits regular food. I don't think she can digest it. But what are some of the issues that maybe both in shelter and out of shelter for senior cats?
Just like with people, when you have a lifetime of something, whether that be what you eat, drink, smoke, lifestyle, you're going to end up with an accumulated effect late in life, whether that's heart disease or diabetes or whatever that manifests itself into. The same as with animals as well. So again, nutrition, if you feed a cat dry food its whole life, going to end up with chronic kidney disease later in life, very likely. And that's going to lead to a cat having incontinence issues and, urinary tract infection type symptoms. And it's hard for people to live with that. It's hard when a cat gets geriatric stage and, might need insulin shots, might need, very expensive treatments. I fostered a cat that had a thyroid issue, hyperthyroid issue, and they actually irradiate thyroids in cats because cats can actually grow another thyroid and it returned to a normal condition, but not until you radiation that thyroid in the first place. And, that's a $3,000 treatment. So it gets very expensive. And a lot of people just simply don't have the resources to properly care for senior animals, and they get surrendered to shelters. There are a lot of senior people that have senior cats, and when they are no longer physically able to take care of them or have to relocate into family homes or a nursing facility, oftentimes we'll see a lot of those senior animals in shelters. And once they end up in the shelter, it's very, very difficult to adopt them out because most people are there looking for a kitten or a young cat. And, they're looking for an end of life, stages, high maintenance animal. They're just not what people are looking for. So they're very difficult to place. And the stress that those cats face in the shelter usually also, magnify whatever is going on with them from a health issue. And a lot of them come in undiagnosed. Again, people just can't afford to go through the expensive tests and diagnosis to find out, why their cat's lost a lot of weight and sleeping all the time and things like that. So it's a very sad demographic to see in a shelter environment.
I think even a cat that's 5 can have problems being adopted because Peanut, that we just guy yesterday. She's 5 years old, and she was at the pet store. That, of course, that doesn't mean the pet store is selling her. They're put there through the Animal Alliance in order for people to adopt them. But I kept thinking, why is nobody adopting this cat? She's so pretty and gentle, and I think maybe it's because she wasn't a kitten-like. She didn't come up and jump up at the thing and want to play with you, and she's 5 years old. But so I'm really in favor of not going for the young jumpy kitten ones. Unless you're totally committed to taking care of this animal for the rest of its life.
Yeah. And that behavior of not coming up to the cage door and wanting to interact with people, that does get a cat overlooked for a lot of times, long periods of time. So the work that we do with the Jackson Galaxy Cat Positive Pro program, which is a nonprofit that's part of Greater Good, we work with shelters across the country to help train their staff how to work with those cats and teach them skills. So we'll teach a cat that's a little shy and shut down how to high five. And we use clicker training to do that. So they'll come to the door and want to high five with people, or head bump, or things that get them attention. And it makes them much more adoptable.
Well, that'll lead me into my last question for you, is common misconceptions people have. Not just people who don't like cats, because there are people who just don't like cats for whatever reason, but just one of them, I think, is that cats are untrainable. People think you cannot train cats, but I saw your video with the clicker training, and I know that that's not true. So can you talk a little bit about these ideas people have about cats that are not correct?
Yeah, a lot of people, like you said, think that, well, cats can't be trained, but they absolutely can. You can train a cat anything it wants to do. Unlike dogs, you can't train a cat something it doesn't want to do, because intimidation doesn't work on cats. Dogs come from a hierarchical social setting. So there's an alpha dog and a pack leader, and they want to please the pack leader, which becomes their person. Well, cats don't have that structural hierarchical social. They're solitary creatures. So they don't really want to please you. They want to please themselves, and they want to make sure that they have what they need to survive, and they want to make sure they have plenty of resources. But they are also food motivated most of the time, and there are things they enjoy, like affection and playing and things like that. So in a positive, rewarding situation, you can teach cats to do all kinds of things. Tabasco comes when he's called, he sits, he high fives, he sits up, he spins, he walks on a leash. He's very, very well behaved and well trained. But that is, the other myth too. There's kind of rolled up answers in one. But the other myth is that cats need buddies. That there is an alpha cat. People in multi-cat households will tell me, I have so-and-so's the alpha cat. Well, there really isn't any such thing. They learn to share spaces. There's oftentimes an insecure cat. There's oftentimes a frightened cat, and there's oftentimes a bully, but there's not really an alpha cat. And their positions and their emotions of whether I'm afraid that cat's going to get my resources, or I'm afraid of that cat, that changes from day to day too, and it changes from cat to cat. So one cat might be the bully, 1 year, and then something happens dynamically, and the other cat's going to start bullying. But they're not fighting for alpha position. They're simply fighting out of fear. Usually, that's the number one thing that cats are dealing with.
So if you have, for instance, if you have two cats and one of them dies, and you think, oh, I should get another cat so it's not alone, it doesn't care that it's alone?
Oftentimes, yes, it does become, they do build social bonds with one another, and obviously with us, thankfully. But it's not going to see another cat as the cat that it had a social bond with. It took years for them to successfully cohabitate and learn how to share spaces. So when you bring another cat into the environment, that cat is just seen as an invasion. That's a territory invasion by a complete stranger. Because again, they're not, dogs or pack animals. They like to be with one another. They hunt together. They work together. Cats don't do any of that. They don't work together. They don't hunt together. They don't share, prey typically. They're very, very solitary creatures. So, that cat may be lonely, yes, when its companion passes away. You can get another cat, and as long as you do the introduction very, very slowly, it can work. Are they going to have the same close, intimate bond that the two cats had previously? Maybe, maybe not. It's not always a guarantee. You have much better success with dogs in that situation.
Okay, well, Molly, I'm last thing I'm going to ask you is, because I ask it with every podcast, is what's your passion about? Sometimes it's not the subject of the podcast, but I think it might be with you.
It is. It's very definitely. I'm a graphic artist. I'm also a fine artist. I paint, and I have lots of things. I love to be outdoors. I love to hike, things like that. But the cat passion has always been an underlying theme in my whole life. And finally, I've reached a stage where I've just said, I've had to work, I've had to make an income. And, I'm at a point in my life where I need to do what my passion is. And my passion is saving these little guys from being turned into the shelter, because shelters can't help the number of cats that come in, and shelters can't help the fact that they're space limited. So my feeling is I've got to help that problem at the source. I've got to catch those problems in the home and keep those people from getting so frustrated with their cat that they want to turn it into the shelter and rehome it. And that's become my absolute passion and life goal.
Well, I think you are realizing it amazingly well, and you've been a tremendous resource for me. Just awesome. Now, how can people find you? Tell them about your website URL and whatever else you want people to know.
Absolutely. You can find lots of amazing cat information and good tips like we've been talking about today at www.catbehaviorsolutions.org.
Okay, great. And
also on Facebook, Cat Behavior Solutions on Facebook as well. I post there, and we're also on Instagram as Cat Behavior Solutions.
Molly, thank you. It was great to talk to you again, and in a different format, because the last time we talked, it was about my cat. And I'm really happy to share you with other people, because I think it's fascinating. I think it's great information for animal, people, not just cat people. And I wish you the best of luck, and I know we're going to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, for having me on your show, and best of luck to you, what you're doing. You're following your passion, and that's great.
Thank you. You have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.